Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sierra Ventures Ascend podcast, where we explore excellence at scale. I'm your host, Anne Graney. I'm excited to share my conversation with Liang. Hugh was the founder and CEO of Omniex. Omniex was a crypto asset trading platform empowering the institutional adoption of crypto and blockchain. The company's platform offered services including portfolio management, investment operations, risk and compliance, and trade execution. The company was acquired by Gemini in 2022, and the acquisition enabled Gemini to publicly launch Gemini Prime, a crypto prime brokerage offering. Prior to founding Omniex, Hugh was SVP at State Street, where he oversaw the bank's emerging technology center. This is a fun conversation because we touch not only on Hugh's entrepreneurial success, but also discuss his perspective on recent crypto events shaping the future of institutional interest. Please enjoy my conversation with Liang. Hugh, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I wanted to start off with how your experience at State Street and with electronic FX platforms that influenced your approach to building Omniex.
Yeah, specifically to State Street and my past FX experience is actually quite a bit. If you ask people that know FX and crypto fairly well, you know that the way you trade crypto today, because we're not 100% sure whether it's equity or whether it's commodities or whether it's currency, ultimately it trades in a way that is very similar to FX, kind of a OTC product. So a lot of the background that I had in FX translates very, very directly. I would say, if you want to throw a number, 70, 80% of what we know in the past translated to the product design that we had for crypto. And also, more importantly, if you look at the industry at least 3-4 years ago, the people that were building crypto infrastructure or blockchain infrastructure, whether it's a hedge fund, whether it's a separate startup company, all had some kind of background. So those connections, it almost seemed like every 2-3 days when I talked to somebody, I either knew them before or they were, in a related company. So there was a lot of experience that I had with State Street that was hugely helpful. And also the company that became State Street called Kernax, and also a big bank, it just gives you a lot of credibility as well. So that helped certainly quite a bit.
And why did you break off to become a founder? Why did you start Omniex? What was the thing that led you there?
Yeah, I think that probably started way back. I mean, I'm an electrical engineering undergrad, so I really love technology. I really like to build things. I had a little foray very early on in my career of a failed startup founder. And I always thought about it would be great to be able to, not only be successful in what I do and participating in projects, but also create something from the ground up. Everything kind of just lined up at the right time. There was an industry that was really coming about. It was a technology that I understood really well. I actually started my career at IBM Research through asymmetrical encryption, which is essentially the technology that underpins the blockchain. And as we just said earlier, what I did in FX and State Street had a huge direct relationship with how we were looking at the crypto market evolving. So everything kind of lined up together at the time.
And what was some of the biggest challenges that you faced in starting something new, and especially in this space, because it was pretty early on still in crypto before it really had become mainstream? So what were some of the hurdles you had to jump over?
Yeah, I would say that the hurdles that we as a team encountered isn't particularly special about blockchain or crypto, right? There were two things. One is when you're in an industry that is really new and a lot of hype around it, all kinds of people are coming in. So a big problem there was just how do you differentiate between what you're building versus everything that somebody else was simply pitching, but was still getting funding just because it was a crazy market. So differentiating yourself both from the competitors as well as from the hype of the market was a huge challenge, right? We had to really say what we're doing. Why are we different? So therefore, using our background credibility was really, really important. And the other challenge was that, in any good market condition, finding the right team is going to be very challenging. And in a hype market where everybody was trying to create this company, hiring this person, hiring that person, finding that right team was also very challenging. So, I think we had to do a lot of different creative methods to market ourselves, finding the right talent. But I think ultimately it comes down to is what you can build, right? The best way to differentiate yourself is building the right product.
And in that, what were you most proud of that you built at Omniex in the years that you did it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my founders and I and teams, we talk about this on and off, right? And I think the thing we found most proud of is that we actually built a product that was used by a lot of different companies, and it had a real value to other people, whether it's our client or ultimately the company we merged with. During a hype situation, you see a lot of companies getting funded with huge amount of money. And, sometimes you sit on the side and you're like, wow, how did they get so much more funding than we did? Or why are they coming out in the market with this press release that sounds so much better than ours? But I think when all the dust settled, and when we've seen this in the last couple of years of the number of companies that didn't build a product, right, that failed in what they did, or worse yet, implicated in some kind of criminal activity even. But having a team like we did, actually building a product, actually being used and being successful in our outcome is really what we're most proud of. And as we also said earlier, why did I start doing this? I like to create something. And the fact that, feeling I actually built something that is actually being used is what really makes me the most proud, probably.
And you touched on something that I hear a lot from founders, especially in the early stage of building, that you hear all this news and it's so hard to block it out about potential competitors popping up every day in the news. So how do you stay focused and how do you keep your team focused in the early days?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is personality, right? I think any strong founder probably has a lot of inner conversations with themselves. I think, I understood myself as someone, I come across as pretty calm, pretty steady, but I have a lot of self-doubt as well. There's a lot of times at night, and I just mentioned, you see someone else coming in the news, you see someone else saying they released a product, but you really don't know what it is. It sounds so perfect. A lot of it is just, talking to yourself. I think it's perfectly fine to talk to yourself, unless your psychologist says it's too much. But you have these conversations, right? You try to make yourself confident in what you do. And I think the team really is, since building Omniex, what I realized is the most important part. For those founders who actually founded a company by themselves, that's incredible. I'm not sure if I'm able to do that or if I would do that again. But the founders that I started with, we're still good friends. We talk a lot. You really form a bond, and you have to depend on each other, and you have to talk to each other. So, and rest of the team is it is team building. I think there's hiring people that you know really well from the past has a lot of benefits because you know them, but you also end up having a lot of mindsets that's already set. Finding new people, you get new ideas, but you really don't have enough understanding of each other. You don't know how you're doing business. You don't know how you think. So there's no really good way. I think a lot of it is trial and error, and hopefully every time you do it, you do a little bit better. And the next time you do it, you avoid some of those challenges. But I think some challenges you just cannot avoid. You're going to make a mistake and you have to move forward. And I think, yeah, one of the biggest things is you just can't dwell on your mistakes. You make a mistake, hopefully you learn from it, but you got to move forward.
And then you talked a little bit about hiring the rest of the team aside from your co-founders. Was there anything that you learned along the way of finding like that talent that really is going to help move the needle?
Yeah, I think the more you know someone in a social situation, I think it's really, really great, because during the interview process, people are going to talk about what they've done. They're going to look like their best. They're going to speak about their best. I kind of think of it as like the current social media, right? Everybody looks so great, either on their resume or whatever it is that they're posting or talking about. But what you really don't know about them is probably the most important. There probably isn't a best way to really find out. I think if you're able to have a courtship where you're really local, you're meeting each other, you spend some time, you have dinner, that's really how you can find out whether someone's character or personality really work. I think the most important thing is once you become part of a team, you're going to have tough times, and you're going to have to tell each other things that are not comfortable. And if you're able to tell them that uncomfortable subject matter in a comfortable way, that's how you get through. And if you can't, or if you don't talk about it, then it kind of just boils up, and you both will end up in a bad place. So we've had both situations. We had cases where things just didn't work out. We took too long, and that set us back. And we had cases where people are amazing, and I'd love to do another startup with them.
I want to switch to the acquisition by Gemini. What prompted the decision to sell Omniex? And how did you ensure that the company's vision and culture that I know you were so proud of would be preserved post-acquisition?
Yeah, I think a lot of these things they kind of come up based on timing, circumstances of the market. We didn't have a direct goal of either doing this or that. I think what had happened for us is around the pandemic timeframe. We were looking at Series B financing. Crypto just happened to be really turning in a positive way. Institutions, banks were all starting to come up, and we just naturally had a number of inbounds. As we looked at what we wanted to do, the goals that we had, the size of resources that we needed, both in terms of internal decision between the team and as well as our investors, we all kind of just agreed this was the right way to do it, and this is the right way to go. It's a very organic kind of discussion that came about.
And how did the integration of Omniex technology contribute to the launch of Gemini Prime? And really, what impact did it have, or do you believe it's had on the broader crypto market?
Yeah, I can certainly say about how did it contribute to the product and offering within Gemini to the broader industry. I think it's probably too much boasting to say we made a huge dent in the entire market. I think we certainly added credibility once again, as I said that before, by having a really solid product that had institutional experience from the traditional markets added to the world of crypto and blockchain. We were really the technology that underpinned a lot of the Prime offering services. I think not only to Gemini, but to other clients as well. We basically provided the technology framework that were very similar to prime brokerage frameworks of traditional equities and FX type of services. So, and that's why it made this kind of synergy and merger really work out, right? We had the right technology. We wanted to create something big. Gemini did as well, and the two kind of came together as it did.
That's great. And then let's talk a little bit about the industry insights for both crypto and for blockchain. For crypto specifically, the last year has been a roller coaster from FTX and Binance trouble to the approval of ETFs most recently. We're recording now in the end of January 24. How do you see these events shaping the future of crypto, especially when it comes to institutional investors?
The unfortunate events that we had experienced in 21 and 22, and it's less about the technology itself. I think it's more about the people involved, right? There's a lot of time we talk about this, are you building something because it's touched a bit on the regulatory market? Are you building something and taking risks? Are you asking for permission, or you're asking for forgiveness? I think a lot of the companies involved were more focused on, I'm just going to build it and I'll ask for forgiveness later, rather than working with some of the institution and the regulatory bodies and asking first for permission. It's a balance that you have to do, right? Because if you're asking for permissions all the time, you'll never get anywhere. That's kind of like what it is in the banking industry. Nobody gets anything done, really. If you're just doing whatever you're doing and asking for forgiveness later, particularly in something that has to do with finance and people's money and livelihood, then you can get yourself into trouble. I think what we've seen, unfortunately, in the last few years is a lot of companies that didn't ask for permission and took it a little too far, right? And got hurt a bit and really set the entire industry back. I think the recent event of the SEC approving the ETF, it's a big moment, right? It legitimizes the product and allows the broader market to partake in the adoption of crypto. But I think ultimately, in the longer term, you have to have broader market adoption. To me, I think of crypto, you can think of it as an investment opportunity, right? Like a Bitcoin, like an Ethereum, the token prices move up and down. And for people who want to speculate or invest, you want the value to go up. But ultimately, for those products, they have to have some sort of intrinsic value. How do they make products and our services and our lives better, right? Bitcoin, I think it's actually established a use case of a digital gold. Ethereum is building out a network, but what utility is the other 200-300 tokens adding to the world? Can it actually make payments move faster? Can it actually make decentralized applications a reality? So we have to see broad market adoption of the underlying technology and not just look at the movement of the prices, right? We can see Bitcoin going up to 100,000, but that's one particular use case, but that's not going to necessarily help the entire crypto and the blockchain market.
From a technology perspective, how does the rapid evolution of AI that we've experienced in this last year affect the future of blockchain and crypto?
I don't know if they will necessarily intersect, or do they have to intersect. I think the news of AI and its development certainly have overshadowed crypto and blockchain, right? Is the next big thing. But I do think there's some kind of interaction between the two. AI's ability for algorithms to help people make decisions, make faster decisions. Blockchain is a decentralized data storage mechanism. So if you think of, machines being able to use data to make decisions, where do they get that data from? How is it stored? How do you verify that data, especially in a decentralized way, using the internet? They seem to be, some sort of interaction should come about. Maybe we'll all find out pretty soon.
Are there any gaps that you see right now in the market when it comes to blockchain or crypto that you're excited for entrepreneurs to be solving?
I don't think we necessarily need to think about, what product is crypto really the best to solve. I think we should focus on what big problems are there out there for us to solve. I think for me as an entrepreneur, if I do it again, I would go after the problem of the market more so than the technology, right? Identify the problem, identify what the real needs are, then take a look and say, hey, is this better served with AI? Is this most served with the blockchain? Is this the best use case for crypto? If it is, then you go after it. I think you have to be flexible as an entrepreneur to really serve the market, as opposed to taking the technology and saying, hey, I got a really cool tech here. Where do I shove it into? I think in most cases, most failed cases, that's how people think, a little bit backwards, right? I know a tech, it's a shiny object. Where do I put it? Many cases, they will work that way, but I think in most cases, it's better to follow the traditional view of let's solve problems. And that's what entrepreneurs should be doing, solving problems.
Is there anything that you would have done differently in this first part of your career, especially regarding Omniex and its journey?
Yeah, I think anybody who's saying I did it so perfectly, I'll just use the same mold and do it again is absolutely lying. There's a lot of things, and I think the things that I've learned as an entrepreneur versus the things that I learned as someone in a bigger institution or a bank, there are similarities and there are a lot of differences too. In a startup, you're used to moving very fast and taking risks. And I think I would probably move even faster and take even more risks. Moving faster in the context of people we talked about earlier, right? If some team member really doesn't work, you got to make the hard decision and just make that change rather than trying to make it work. Same thing with a product. If a product doesn't seem to be working, especially I think in the early stages, you gotta have a willingness to make that change. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs fall into this sunk cost thing. Oh, we've spent so much effort on this. Let's try it a little bit more. You got to be willing to sacrifice and make some of those changes. I think it's a different when you become more established and you have the resources to wait out the market changes, the market fluctuations, and the market cycles. But in the early stages, you have to be willing to make changes quick. And also taking risks too. Obviously, you don't want to take reckless risks, right? You are an early company, you're on an umbilical cord, you have limited resources, but sometimes you do have to take a bit more risk and be confident in yourself and your team that you can raise the additional capital to really make it big. I don't think it's particularly any different than what other founders might tell you, but it's just something that once you do it once or twice, you just become more firm about it. You got to move fast. You got to be willing to take risks.
And then as an entrepreneur, are there any books that you recommend for those that are thinking about kind of making the leap?
Oh, you caught me off guard a little bit. There's quite a few books that I've read in the past. I'm trying to really think about it. The first time I started a company was when I was quite young. This was back in the year 2000, a few months before the crash of the dot-com bubble. And needless to say, that one didn't really go anywhere. But I think the book that I read at that time was called The Silicon Valley Way. I don't even remember when it was printed, and it was a very short book, and it really talks about the early stages of Silicon Valley and what it was like to being an entrepreneur. A lot of the things I talked about here, teams and taking risk and willingness to change. And it's probably way, way outdated now. There's tons of other books, but I do remember that one, reading it and feeling pretty good and excited about giving it a try.
That's great. Well, Hugh, thanks so much for taking the time today. This has been fantastic. What's the best way for people to follow your career or follow along or connect with you?
Geez, I think just best thing to do is just hit me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big, huge social media person, but LinkedIn is something that I do keep up to date.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Hugh, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ann. That was fun.